I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing on my nightstand. It was a text from my friend, Sarah. She wanted me to come over and watch a movie with her tonight. I sighed and looked out the window at the dark sky. It was a chilly night in our small town, and the thought of going outside made me shiver. But I couldn't resist the chance to hang out with my best friend. I got dressed and walked over to Sarah's house, which was just a few blocks away. As I approached her front door, I noticed something strange. The house across the street was dark and silent, even though it was only 7 p.m. It was owned by an elderly woman who had lived there for as long as anyone could remember. She was always friendly, but lately, she had become reclusive, and nobody had seen her in weeks. As Sarah and I settled in to watch our movie, we heard a strange noise coming from outside. It sounded like scratching at the front door. Sarah looked at me with wide eyes, and I felt a lump form in my throat. We tiptoed over to the door and looked through the peephole. To our horror, we saw a figure standing on the front porch, its face obscured by the shadows. Without thinking, I flung the door open and screamed at the figure to leave us alone. But as the light from the porch flooded over it, we both gasped in horror. It was the elderly woman from across the street, but her skin was gray and leathery, and her eyes were sunken and dead. She moaned and reached out with bony fingers, and we slammed the door shut in terror. For the rest of the night, Sarah and I huddled together, watching the windows and listening for any more sounds. But the rest of the night was quiet, and we eventually fell asleep. The next morning, we learned that the elderly woman had died in her sleep, and her body had been left undiscovered for several days. From that night on, I couldn't shake the feeling that our small town was no longer safe. The thought of what other horrors might be lurking in the shadows kept me up at night, and I was never able to look at the old houses and dark alleys with the same innocent eyes again. Days passed, and the incident with the old woman slowly faded into the back of our minds. But the sense of unease in our small town remained. Strange noises could be heard at night, and the once peaceful streets were now barren and eerie. It was as if a dark cloud had settled over our community, and nobody knew why. One night, as I was walking home from Sarah's house, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned around, but nobody was there. I picked up my pace and quickened my steps, but the footsteps kept following me, growing louder and closer. Suddenly, I felt a cold breath on my neck, and I turned around to see a figure shrouded in darkness. Its eyes were glowing with an otherworldly light, and its skin was ashen and cold. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. The figure reached out with its hand, and I felt an icy grip around my throat. I gasped for air as the world around me began to fade to black. When I woke up, I was lying on the ground, surrounded by darkness. My head was throbbing with pain, and I could barely move. As I looked around, I realized that I was no longer in my small town. I was in a place of darkness and despair, where the air was thick with the stench of death. Suddenly, I heard a voice whispering in my ear. "Welcome to the other side," it said. "You'll never leave this place again." And as I lay there, trapped in the darkness, I realized that the horror of my small town was only the beginning of the nightmare that was to come. I struggled to stand up, but my body felt heavy and weak. The darkness around me seemed to swallow everything, making it difficult to see or move. But I knew I had to find a way out of this place, or I would be trapped here forever. As I stumbled forward, I heard strange whispers and moans coming from the darkness. The sound of something shuffling towards me, dragging its feet along the ground, sent shivers down my spine. I could feel the cold, clammy breath of unseen beings on my skin, and I knew that I was not alone in this place. I tried to run, but my legs felt like they were made of lead. The more I struggled, the stronger the grip of the darkness became. The air grew colder and heavier with every step I took, as if the very atmosphere was trying to suffocate me. Finally, I saw a faint light in the distance. I ran towards it, desperate to escape the grasp of the darkness. As I drew closer, I saw that it was a door, illuminated by a flickering flame. I pushed it open, and a rush of fresh air hit me in the face. I stumbled out into a desolate landscape, where the sky was black and the ground was barren. In the distance, I could see a group of figures huddled around a fire. As I approached, they turned to look at me, and I saw that their eyes were empty and soulless. They welcomed me to their world, and I knew then that I was never going to leave. The horror of my small town was only the beginning of the nightmare that was to come. This was a place beyond death, where the darkness held sway and the living were trapped forever. And I knew that I was now a part of it. Days turned into months, and months turned into years. I roamed the desolate landscape, searching for a way out, but it was all for naught. The darkness had claimed me, and I was now one of the soulless beings that once welcomed me to their world. I no longer felt fear or pain, just a deep sense of emptiness and despair. Memories of my past life were fading, and the horrors of my small town were a distant memory. I had accepted my fate, and I knew that I would never leave this place. But then, one day, a group of living beings stumbled upon our world. They were lost, just like I was once lost, and they were searching for a way out. I watched as they struggled to survive, and I felt a faint glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, I could help them escape this place. I reached out to them, offering guidance and support, but they couldn't see or hear me. I was just a specter in their world, a shadow of what I once was. And so, I watched as they slowly succumbed to the darkness, one by one. I watched as they became like us, soulless beings trapped in a world beyond death. And I knew then that there was no escape from this nightmare. I was doomed to wander this desolate landscape for all eternity, forever haunted by the memories of my past life and the horrors of my small town. The darkness had claimed me, and I would never be free.